Welcome to the Occult London podcast. This is a new podcast dedicated to exploring magic, mysticism, the Kabbalah, as well as other topics. If you like the podcast, please write a review and rate us on iTunes, as it will really help us to get this message out there. Also, be sure to visit our website at occultlondon.co.uk, where you can subscribe to the show. If anyone has any questions for me, then I'd love to hear from them, so please reach out by Facebook or on email. I'd love to answer any questions you have. You can find our Facebook on the show notes, or alternatively email us at occultlondonpodcast@gmail.com. Hope you enjoy it. In today's episode, we've had a bit of a break because I've been focusing on writing new episodes over the last few weeks, and also had a bit of a travelling trip around the UK. But I wanted to do a couple of episodes which are sort of following on from our series on the magical use of incense, and in particular I wanted to do two episodes focusing on two of the most famous incenses which are out there, which is frankincense and myrrh. So in this episode we will be talking about frankincense and what its symbolism, what its significance is in regards to spiritual and magical practices throughout the ages. So frankincense and myrrh is obviously, it's two of the most famous incenses out there. Although there are other resins, there's things like pine, copal, storax, and dragon's blood. Frankincense and myrrh generally are like the most popular that have been used throughout time. There's lots of different stories and myths about this particular incense, and there's lots of different stories about this particular incense, and we hear stories from Herodotus, how the gum-bearing trees were guarded by red snakes which leapt into the air to inflict bites on the intruder. The incense trees were also meant to grow in mountainous areas where it was surrounded by mist that caused deadly epidemics, and it was considered very dangerous to collect the resin that they used to create these incenses. So they'd often be defined as being a sacred place, sacred to a particular god, and often guarded by a particular guardian. And Herodotus said the following, I just wanted to quote from him: "Arabia is the only place that produces frankincense, myrrh, cassia, cinnamon, and the gum called ledanon. All these, except the myrrh, cause the Arabians a lot of trouble to collect. When they gather frankincense, they burn storax, the gum which is brought into Greece by the Phoenicians, in order to raise a smoke, to drive off the flying snakes. These snakes, the same which attempt to invade Egypt, are small in size and of various colours, and great numbers of them keep guard over all the trees which bear the frankincense, and the only way to get rid of them is by smoking them out with storax." And that's from Herodotus. Another writer who mentions them as well is Theophrastus, and he mentions them in his book called the Historia Planetarum, and also Pliny the Elder in his Natural History talks about frankincense and myrrh. So what we can tell by this is obviously these are very valuable commodities. They are considered very rare. They're considered dangerous to collect and worthy of being guarded. And as we can see, the trade for these particular incenses was very lucrative all over the world for over 1,500 years. And the geographical region where they would have grown was very small, so the price of this was very high, and demand would have outstripped the volume that could be produced by these small volumes of trees. And as a result of this, the commodity of incense made a lot of traders extremely wealthy. The trading of frankincense and myrrh kind of increases around the 11th century with better land routes and the domestication of camels. And the plants would have been harvested in northeast Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, and then transported to Egypt and India by sea. The Arabian frankincense and myrrh, would have been carried in camels, crossing the desert, navigating the stars, and It's quite a romantic image of these big chains of camels crossing over the desert at night, bearing gifts of incense and frankincense and myrrh. A lot of cities would have made quite a lot of money from this, such as Petra. I don't know if anyone's ever been there, but it's a really amazing carved out city, basically out of the rock. And also, by 1000 BCE, really kind of frankincense and myrrh would have been so widely distributed throughout the old world. Babylon, Assyria, Egypt, Persia, Rome, Greece and China, they all imported these resins that were used in different temples and also as part of medicines as well. So frankincense and myrrh would have been prized possessions in the ancient world, rivaling the value of different gems and metals. And the height of the trade would have taken place between the 2nd century CE, when 3,000 tons of incense was shipped from South Arabia to Greece, Rome and the Mediterranean. And after the 3rd century, it would have slightly gone into decline. So let's talk quickly about the actual incense of frankincense itself and what it means. So Arabs called the milky sap of the frankincense tree al-lub, which is from the word for milk. And it was also used when it was talking about Lebanon, whose mountains were always capped by milky snow. Al-luban later changed to olibarmen, which is another name for frankincense. And the word frankincense also means a true, or the frank incense. The trees, obviously it comes from a tree. They're normally found in countries such as Oman, Somalia, Ethiopia, Yemen and the southern Arabian Peninsula and India. The desert of the Dhofar region in southern Oman is the source of the Boswellia sacra, sacred frankincense, and the Boswellia serrata, Indian frankincense, is widely distributed in the kind of dry and hilly parts of India. The trees on the Somali coast also produce frankincense resin, and they kind of grow on this sort of very polished marble rocks that don't have much soil. But the frankincense really likes that particular type of climate to grow in, and the purer the marble, the stronger the tree seems to be as well. So in terms of the kind of morphology of the incense, it's a hardened gum residue, so it's a mixture of kind of volatile gum, resin and oils, and from a species known as the Boswellia. In terms of how it looks, it's sort of translucent, brittle, whitish yellow, and really nice smell, and it's kind of round and club shaped, so kind of little, almost like little rocks really that you would get. Prices traditionally, in terms of the history of it, would have varied quite drastically. Sorry, I can't talk today. Depending on the colour. So the purer colours would have been much more expensive, and obviously that would have a relation to the scent as well. So it would be it's a very strong, acrid scent, but also very aromatic, and it really kind of brings a really interesting atmosphere when you burn it. In some cultures, they also chew frankincense as well. So when you chew it, it actually becomes soft, almost like a kind of chewing gum. When it's burnt, frankincense produces a brilliant flame, and it gives out an amazing aroma as well. And it's difficult to describe. It's a very kind of sweet, but also kind of balsamic-y scent, and there's a sort of fruity top note as well. And the fragrance is really predominantly due to lots of different factors within the actual composition of the resin itself. There's apparently 25 different species of tree within the genus. So in the Dhofar region, the trees tend to be quite short and squat, reaching a height of 5 meters. And they have kind of papery peeling bark, which varies from reddish white to pure white. And then there's also, it grows in other places as well, and in different forms. The frankincense in India Boswellia serrata is a large, quite tall tree which has a straight buttress trunk with a clear bole and widespread branches, and this the trunk and the branch are very kind of grey in colour as well. In terms of the actual harvesting of the incense, and this is one of those factors that you kind of bring in environmental questions these days. So in Oman, the frankincense is gathered by the Bedouin, and the trees are actually owned by families in particular regions, and sort of guardianship of the trees is passed down from generation to generation. And there's various different ancient sort of rituals and ceremonies surrounding the harvesting of the resin within the frankincense. And then on the southern Arabian coast, the trees are tapped often by visiting parties of Somalis who pay the Arabs for the privilege of collecting them. Frankincense from Oman is harvested during the spring and the fall, and then in India it's kind of more towards the end of October. The way they do it is actually quite similar to how you would harvest things like maple syrup. So they score the trunks at different parts along the main trunk and then the branches, and then the milk, the wounds in the tree basically produce a milky white resin which hardens as it dries on the tree, and then obviously that is taken away and dried out, and then the raw frankincense is stored in dry caves and to cure, and then it's sold on. And as I said, there's different grades. So the first is like the superfine, which is very translucent, very white yellow, free from impurities, and then the longer it goes on, it becomes more and more browny colour, and that's kind of got more less kind of chemical purity from the point of view of the incense, so if that makes sense. And that's something that's quite interesting about incense as well, because I know it's hugely popular these days in lots of different spiritual practitioners, and also just people that like to make their house smell nice, etc. However, there is quite a lot of concern over these trees being over harvested for commercial gain rather than being sustainably farmed. So that's something that's quite interesting from the point of view of how can we continue with an incense trade but keep it sustainable and environmentally friendly rather than completely overusing the trees so that they can't survive. So anyway, I hope everyone's enjoyed that. I just wanted to do a little bit of history of frankincense. I'm going to do another episode on myrrh as well, just briefly. And then coming up, we're going to be doing a series of episodes on some of the more kind of magical rites and things like that within the Western mystery tradition. So hope everyone's enjoyed it. And yeah, as I said, please leave us a review if you are interested, or if you did enjoy the episode, and also reach out if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Your candles burn bright, soothing me softly in your silver light. Oh, friend of mine, your vision is divine.